Welcome to the Emotional Eating Unwrapped podcast. I'm your host, Alana Kessler, an emotional eating and weight loss coach for women looking to fall in love with eating, create healthy attachments with food, and lose weight sustainably. Hello and welcome to another new episode of Emotional Eating Unwrapped. I'm your host, Alana Kessler, and today's episode, I feel, has been a long time coming. I get so many questions about this, and I am so happy that Cassie and I decided to just make a completely full, dedicated episode to breaking the scale mentality and how numbers and focusing on numbers keep us stuck. Okay? I get so many questions about the scale, about weight loss, about numbers, all this stuff that really I think that it's high time that that we just address it head on. We have a full episode about it, and it's something that for me I don't really think so much about it so much anymore. I don't hyper focus on weight and numbers so much anymore in my life, but it definitely was something that defined me for a very long time, right? Like I know that years ago, if I weighed myself and the number was lower than I had thought it was, or it actually was a number that I had somehow put in my brain would signify success, I'd feel like I won the day. I feel like the day was amazing. It really impacted my mood in almost like a way that was over. It was like bigger than it should be. I can't think of the word, but bigger than it should be. But if the weight was higher than I had thought, even by just a pound or two, it could send me into a total downward spiral of self-doubt, of guilt, of punishment. I would sometimes like body dysmorphia. I would feel like I would want to hide. I would sometimes cancel plans. It would impact the way that I ate. I would feel like I had less, I'd feel more scared around eating. I would sometimes let myself go more with food. I would sometimes get more obsessive with food, feeling like I needed to control things a little bit more. I'm not sure if that's something that, if you're listening, that you have felt as well. But I know firsthand what it feels like to let the number on the scale dictate your mood, dictate your choices, and dictate your self-worth. And it just shouldn't, right? So today I want to talk about breaking free from that scale mentality where the number on the scale dictates so much of your day-to-day experience. And we'll talk about why those numbers are not the whole story and how focusing on those numbers keep us stuck in cycles of shame, cycles of perfectionism, and most importantly, we'll get deep and granular on how to create a healthier relationship with the scale if weight loss is your goal. Because the truth of the matter is that if weight loss is your goal, creating a healthy relationship with the scale, a realistic relationship with the scale, a more neutral relationship with the scale is something that's important to do. Because I'm not one of those people that believes in avoiding the scale altogether. I do think that you need to know your numbers a little bit if you want to lose weight, and that weight loss is a number. Okay. Now we need to have realistic numbers, and that's something that I work with, people in my programs and everything like that. And that's something that I want you to understand is that if you do have a weight loss number, I want you to make sure that it's, a realistic number, not something that you're, that when you were 17 years old and, at the best shape of your life when you were playing sports at school, and now you're in your late 30s or 40s, or, your body's different or things have changed. And let's get realistic about where we are in our life and have a number that's actually something that's attainable. All right. But I do think that learning how to have a healthy relationship with the scale is really, really important. And it's not something that we should avoid. So let's start with the power and the pain of the scale. Okay. For so many of us, the scale becomes this all-knowing judge. right? Measuring not just our weight, but it measures our worth. And seeing a lower number, we feel like we're validated, like proof that we're doing something right. But when the number goes up, even slightly, there's this like loud voice that could be in your head that says you're failing. And we can go so quickly you know, from feeling good about ourselves to feeling like you're failing. And I remember a time in my life when I weighed myself like multiple times a week. And if the number was lower than the day before, I felt great. I earned the right to enjoy my day. But if it was hot, but if the number was higher, like I said earlier, my mood would completely crash. It would dictate my choices. I would sometimes like cancel plans. I would, you know, either like go to food and kind of just have a day where I was like, okay, this is going to be a binge day, or I would restrict, right? Or I would go to the gym and like try to over exercise or something like that, right? It wasn't at the end of the day, like my behaviors with myself wasn't really about health, or they weren't neutral, or, they weren't rational. They were more like punishment, right? The scale was like this judge, like I said. But here was the thing, like the scale is only a number and doesn't care about all the other things that matter. Right? Like the scale isn't going to show if you're carrying extra weight because your body is holding on to water because of hormones, right? Maybe it's a certain time of the month, or maybe there's something hormonally going on. It's not going to take into consideration inflammation if you're stressed, right? Like higher cortisol levels that might be affecting inflammation. And so your body's holding on to more weight. It's not going to take into consideration if you had a salty meal the night before, right? Like it doesn't take these things into consideration. Which is why, like, a fluctuation of weight within like 5 pounds is something that I feel like is normal. You should think of a 5 pound swing, like a 4 to 5 pound swing sometimes, especially if you could look back at your day and you were like, yes, one of those things happened. I was stressed. I'm in like a part of my cycle where my hormones are whack, and, I had a huge, salty, heavy meal the night before. If any of those things happened and you have a weight fluctuation, it's almost like pretend like that didn't happen. Okay. So you have to think of the number not so literal, not so literally, because weight is really just one piece of the puzzle. Also, what matters is your muscle mass, your bone mass, right? Some people have heavier bones than other people do. Some people have more muscle than fat. Muscle, I know this is kind of like an old adage, but like muscle does weigh more than fat. And some people's muscle mass in their body composition is greater. And so a lower number on the scale means you have less muscle mass, which sometimes means your metabolism is slower, right? So ask yourself if you're even doing the right exercises. Maybe you're doing exercises that are building mass rather than maybe lengthening or toning, or, because there's ways to have your muscles be healthy and working for you without it always being huge mass. So that's something that you want to look at in your day-to-day exercise, and also your bones. Some people, like I said, have heavy bones. So you might want to get a bone density test if that's something that's possible for you. You might be freed to be like, oh, I have heavy bones. That's why my number is higher, right? The number doesn't affect or reflect, for most people, your actual health or your emotional well-being. I've had so many clients that felt like they failed because the number on the scale wasn't moving. Or, like it wasn't moving yet, but they had so many other successes in other areas, right? Like one client was sedentary, had weight to lose, was sedentary, couldn't sleep, had terrible, energy peaks and then crashes, so much stress, bloating, all these things. And she was so hyper focused on the number on the scale that she wasn't even focusing on all the behavior changes that she was making, because all of those successes were overshadowed by the fact that the scale wasn't moving yet. But do you know what ended up happening was that with consistency of doing these things and stopping to focus on the scale, eventually the scale started moving when she'd make these little tweaks that she was able to make because she started focusing on the right things. Right? She wasn't so focused on the number, she started focusing on these other little tweaks in her lifestyle that were impacting the number potentially. Right? Like, you know, like sleep, or like, habits that maybe she couldn't see that she was able to see once she started bringing awareness and attention to it in the program. So, and then with consistency of tweaking and making those subtle changes, the scale started moving along. Okay, food tracking apps can have similar effect to the scale, right? You focus so heavily on calories, on macros, that we lose sight of the connection with ourselves. Right? How is eating making us feel? Are we satisfied? Are we full? Right? Like when we focus just so much on numbers and we give those numbers so much power to tell us when to stop, when we're successful, when it's enough. I remember what it felt like to be stuck in the cycle of emotional eating. I tried every diet out there, counting, tracking, restricting, but nothing ever worked. Food controlled my life, my thoughts, and I constantly felt guilty after eating. But once I learned how to heal the emotional triggers behind my eating and trust my body, everything changed. I stopped obsessing over food, the weight started coming off naturally, and I found real freedom in how I ate and lived. So, I created the Sober Eating year-long mentorship to help other women experience the same transformation. So you can stop battling with food, you can lose weight without deprivation, and you can feel confident in your body again. In this mentorship, you'll have access to my proven nervous system rewiring method. You'll have access to live coaching with me, weekly accountability, and a community of women who truly understand your journey. You'll also have free access to my signature programs, the Emotional Eating Solution and Decoding Permanent Weight Loss, valued at $2,000. Click the link in the show notes to explore the mentorship today. You don't have to do this alone. I'll be right there with you every step of the way. When it's the right, when it's right, when it's wrong, when we focus on numbers to give us that validation, it doesn't work long term because bodies are not machines, right? We don't like normal people, regular people, unless you're an elite athlete, like we can't get our body to do what it wants from data, right? We get our body to move in the direction that we want it to move in by connecting to ourselves, by trusting ourselves, by giving ourselves the freedom to, you know, by giving ourselves the freedom to play, by not being so rigid, right? Like that's how our body starts to trust us. And then when our body trusts us, it drops the weight that's not ours anymore. It drops the weight that you want to lose, okay? So I really encourage you to track these new behaviors with the way that you're relating to eating, relating to food. Not the numbers, not the weight numbers on the scale or macros or calories, right? Like track, think about different things. But are you moving your body in a way that feels good? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you eating enough, high nutritional value food? Are you, not waiting until you get super hungry before you eat? Right? Like all these different things. Like, are you creating a consistent behavior map for yourself that feels sustainable? Are you drinking enough water? Are you going through your day hydrated enough? How do you feel? Right? These are our habits, these are rituals, these are mindsets and ways of being that build the foundation for lasting well-being. And they have nothing to do with the number on the scale. So when I finally ditched the scale as my only measure of progress and I started to focus on like I felt in my body after I ate, like eating foods that had nutritional value that weren't bloating, that didn't make me feel lethargic or like I needed to go grab sugar afterwards or things like that. Like when I started focusing on that, it felt like a weight was lifted off, pun intended, right? Like it felt like a weight was lifted off of me. It was scary because we're so conditioned to think that we have to have these data points to make us feel like we're making progress or that we're doing it right. So it felt scary to just like trust my body and trust myself. But that's what worked, right? That's what worked. I started tuning into my body. I learned to trust my cues. Like, what does hunger feel like? What does satisfaction feel like? Like for so long, I had focused on like the number on the scale to tell me if it was like working. I focused on the macros or calories to tell me if I like ate enough or if I ate too much. Right. But letting go of those things was so freeing for me. Some days I did feel fuller. Some days I did feel less full. Some days I don't like at a certain point, it's like I didn't know how many calories something had. It was more the composition of the food. Like if I ate like a whole like nice bowl of warm cooked vegetables with a nice protein, like I usually felt very full. I don't know how many calories that has, right? Or like rice or something like that. Like who knows? But it's like I would eat I would eat till my hunger cues told me, and I trusted that my body knew what's best. And the weight came off. Okay. But that said, so I know that, like I said earlier, I know many of you have weight loss goals. And I do think that when you do have a weight loss goal, it is really important that you do have a relationship with the scale that's not antagonistic, because I do think that the number for most of you, say you have like over 15 pounds to lose or over 10 pounds to lose, I do think that the number on the scale could be a nice, it is a good thing to know, right? It is a good data point to know, but it is not the only data point. Like I said before, your bone density, your muscle mass, your hormones, your water content, meals a day before, your stress, like all these things matter. But if you have a significant amount of weight to lose, the scale is a good indicator of whether or not the direction is going in the direction you want to go in, as well as your clothing. Because the body composition can change and the number sometimes doesn't. Right? But if you have a lot of weight to lose, normally the number does go down. Like I said, it might not be as low as you rationally in your mind think it should be, which is why I want you to have a number that's realistic. And that's really important. Okay, so if we want to use the scale, how can we use the scale in a healthier way? Here are some of my suggestions. So number one is you want to limit how often you weigh yourself. So I am not a big fan of weighing yourself daily. Okay. You don't want to get on the scale every day and like cross your fingers and hope that it like moved, right? It's like a watch pot never boils, right? You don't want to do that. It's not great for your mental health. It's just, in my opinion, you don't want to weigh yourself every day. Now, again, this is personal. If you're listening to this and you're like, I weigh myself every day and I'm fine with it, that's fine. If you weigh yourself every day and it doesn't affect your mood, it doesn't affect the way you're eating, then keep going. But for most people, I find that, you want to weekly or even monthly check-ins, bi-weekly, right? Every other week can be helpful. This gives your body time to show real changes rather than just focusing on daily fluctuations. Okay. So that's the difference. Daily fluctuations versus real change. Okay. You want to use the scale as data, not as judgment. Okay. The number is just information. It is not a measure of your worth. And when you see the number, instead of seeing it as a measure of success or failure, ask yourself, what does this number tell me about my habits, what I've been doing? See it as feedback and see if you can go back to some of your behaviors, which is why in my programs, we don't just journal food, we journal mood, we journal habits, we journal, my sober eating method. I have an entire healing science methodology based around all of this ecosystem to be able to create an internal environment that affects external change. Okay. Next thing that you want to do is pair it with other measures of progress. So don't let the scale be your only benchmark. Track things like energy, sleep quality, how your clothes feel, how strong you feel during workouts, right? These are just as important as the number on the scale, especially if you are close to your goal, especially if you're looking to lose those last 10, 12 pounds, sometimes, and I know this so well, sometimes the pounds might not be that important, right? Maybe your body is happier. As long as your clothes are fitting how you want it to fit, your energy is good, right? It's let's make sure, I keep repeating this, but realistic goals, right? There was a time where I thought I wanted to be 7 pounds less than this. But it's not, who cares, right? I have energy, my clothes fit great. I don't, the but then but the number maybe is quote unquote would be higher than I would have wanted. But I know my body, I have bone density that's heavier, right? Than someone else who might be a little lighter bone than me. So the number doesn't say it all. But am I happy the way I feel in my clothes? Sure. I love it. Am I energized? Yes. Is my digestion good? Yes. So all the other things are there. The number, if I was attached to that number, I would be miserable because I might just never get there. I probably won't. I don't even try anymore. So I'm just saying for you, if the number is 10 pounds and it's not really affecting how you look in your clothes and your energy and all that stuff, and you're in a size that you like, I wouldn't get hung up on that number. Okay? Check your mindset before stepping on. That is the last tip, right? Check your mindset before stepping onto the scale. If you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling vulnerable, emotional, if you're feeling like you might have gained weight and it's going to affect your mood, it's going to affect your self-esteem, don't test yourself, right? It might not be the best time to weigh yourself. It probably is not the best time to weigh yourself. Don't set yourself up to fail. Wait until you feel grounded so you can approach the scale with a more neutral attitude. Okay? Because when used thoughtfully in this way, the scale can be a helpful tool. And also like I said, a neutral tool. It could be data, but like I said, data is not the only thing we need as humans because we're not machines, right? It's not the only thing that matters. Okay, so the key takeaway that I really want you to take away from this episode is this. Freedom from the scale, it's shifting your mindset from numbers and perfection to self-acceptance and trust. That is essentially what we want to move towards, right? Numbers, progress, data, perfection. We want to be self-connection, self-trust, attunement, and acceptance, and living in reality and trust, like I said before. So when you stop letting the scale dictate your self-worth, you really, ironically, open yourself up to the body releasing weight that it might be holding on to because it feels this pressure from you to lose it. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but it is so true. When you stop hyper-focusing on getting there by a number, the body usually relaxes. And this whole thing is a journey, right? There'll be moments where you feel great, there'll be moments where you don't feel great. It's really like it's not a linear situation. Okay, but each time that you decide to tune into your body, each time that you don't fall into the trap of needing numbers or external metrics to give you that sense of I'm in control, I'm doing the thing. When you just recognize that these day-to-day attunements to your hunger, to your choices, to these things that can shift from day to day, and that the shifting from day to day is okay. Once you do that, that's where real change happens. That's where the results become long lasting and sustainable. Okay. So, as always, I am wishing you a week of kindness towards yourself. And I am so happy that you are here, that you are listening to this. If you're listening on Spotify and Apple, please subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you so much. Please subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends. I'm so thrilled to be sharing these episodes with you again. Thank you so much. And until next time, I am Alana, and thank you for listening to Emotional Eating Unwrapped.